Chapter 19. Cleaved Groins. The following day began about as well as the previous one had ended, with several bruised bollocks and a very uncomfortable silence. Although he'd made it home, Thomas hadn't made it to his bedroom, and instead crashed on the sofa in the sitting room of his flat. When his bladder assaulted him at 6:30, he flailed through what he assumed was his bedroom until ramming his groin into the corner of a coffee table. Groin ramming is agonising at any time of the day, but at 6:30 in the morning, after a night of alcohol and sporting a bladder 3 times conventional size, the pain becomes biblical in both proportion and as something to swear upon. He spent some time afterwards rolling around the floor, wondering who the fuck had put a sharpened coffee table in his bedroom. When realising he wasn't in his bedroom, and that he was largely responsible, he left it at that, having already chastised himself enough with the coffee table. He stood, found his bedroom, and collapsed onto the large, unmade mess in the middle of it. Face down on a pillow, he urinated, and then slept for another 5 hours until the phone rang. With effort, he turned over and winced in pain, suspecting his bollocks were in 3 distinct pieces. Pulling himself across the bed, he collapsed onto the floor. "All right," he yelled. "For fuck's sake, just shut the fuck up!" But the phone wouldn't, and continued ringing from a hallway that seemed a great deal further away than he recalled. Climbing up the wall, he felt for a light switch, but found nothing of the sort. He staggered to the window and felt for the blinds. They clattered as he fumbled, and when pulling at them, daylight was as painful as a coffee table in the bollocks. He reeled and clawed at his face. From his bedroom, he returned to the sitting room, kneed the coffee table, and stumbled into the hallway. With hands flailing, he lifted the handset to his face and growled, "Mr. Corfield? It's Sarah, Mr. Corfield, Murchison Barrington's secretary." Thomas blinked in a bid to find focus, couldn't, and repeated the guttural sounds he'd begun with. "You had an appointment with Mr. Barrington this morning at 10:30. He mumbled something resembling deep-seated annoyance with the world at large, before rubbing his face on the wall. "Really?" "Yes, Mr. Corfield." "What's the time now?" "Nearly midday, Mr. Corfield." Thomas sank to the floor, while life, and all that was wrong with it, got on with amusing itself at his expense. "That's quite a bit later than 10:30, isn't it?" "Yes, Mr. Corfield. The thing is, it was a very important meeting, and you missed it." "Right. Yes, and it involved other people, other very important people." Thomas rubbed his face vigorously. "No, I'm sorry," he said. "You'll either have to start again or speak slower using simpler words. I have a suspicion that my brain's fallen out somewhere on my way home last night because I'm having trouble grasping any of this, unlike my bollocks, which are large." There was a pause on the other end before she said, "Mr. Corfield, Mr. Barrington would like a word. I'll just put you through." Thomas moaned and sank to the floor. And considering he'd sunk to it only moments earlier, this says a great deal about the extent of his frustration. "Thomas? What the hell's going on? You should have been here hours ago." "Yes. Sorry, something came up." "What? Something more important than the defence of your lawsuit?" "Yes, my bollocks, actually. They're quite swollen." "I couldn't care less about your bollocks. You were to see me at 10:30 this morning." "Right, look, I think I've been through this once already this morning. Not so long ago, in fact. With a woman." "I've had Jameson here since 10.
Have you made him some tea?"
"This is no laughing matter, Thomas. This is deadly serious. You know how important this meeting was to your defence. You've been reminded about it countless times over recent months."
"Yes, but the problem with going over things countless times, Murchison, is my tendency to lose count of them, and they just contribute to this seemingly unending quagmire of amorphous procedural stuff my life seems to have become embroiled in."
"Well, if you don't get to grips with said amorphous quagmire, Thomas, you won't have a life worth embroiling."
Thomas sighed. "I rather feel I'm at that stage already."
There was a pause on the other end. "Look, Thomas, I know this whole thing is becoming increasingly difficult to deal with, but it will eventually end. Not necessarily in your favour, but it will end nonetheless.
But in order for it to do so, you have to help me help you. I cannot do my part without ensuring you're properly advised, even if you don't want to be. Things have to follow procedure.
Am I being charged for this call?
You need to help yourself by helping me. As good as I am, I cannot do my job unless you do your part. And that involves turning up to appointments I make, especially when I've organised important people to be at them.
I'm being charged, aren't I?
Apart from anything else, it looks unprofessional on my part. You obviously don't have to worry about your reputation, but I have an enormous one.
It just seems unfair charging me for something I've apparently been reminded of countless times already.
I've had some disappointed people in my chambers this morning, some very important disappointed people. And the one thing one doesn't do with important people, Thomas, is disappoint them.
Yes, all right. You've made your point and charged me for it. It's just that I had a very bad night last night.
In what way?
In that I went out.
Out?
Yes.
What, as in socially?
Yes.
Well, not with friends, obviously.
Obviously. But the thing is, I don't think it went very well.
What makes you say that?
Because I can't remember any of it.
In my experience, that sounds like an ideal evening. I wish all mine were like that.
No, this was a very bad night. I drank.
Well, congratulations!
No, that I drank is not a good thing.
Thomas, one day you'll realise that rose-coloured glasses was written by someone too pissed to spell Roselle.
I didn't want to drink, Murchison.
None of us want to drink, Thomas. It's this bitch of a thing called life that makes us.
Thomas sighed. Look, I'm really sorry about the meeting.
Well, in a way I'm relieved to hear from you. I was worried you'd given up on everything. And this case is so remarkable that you mustn't. The fact that you're suffering a hangover says you're learning to adopt new and exciting coping mechanisms. That in itself is progress.
I'm not doing it again, Murchison, and I'm not drinking. I can't. My bollocks won't take it for a start.
Ha! Listen, Jameson is not flying out until 8:30 this evening. The others have gone, but he's the pivotal character in this strategy. Be at Stella de l'Amour's at 5 this afternoon, do you understand? We'll have a meeting then. I've been raving to him about the place for ages, and he's keen to see what all the fuss is about.
Oh, do I have to? Can't you just do everything you need to and then get me to sign a form afterwards? I'm good at signing forms. It's the one thing I write that people encourage me to.
At 5, understood?
Oh, I'll do my best.
Good. Now go and put some ice on your bollocks.
At 5 that evening, Thomas waited outside a very pert restaurant in a very twee part of the city. He stood outside its door for another 10 minutes, waiting for some courage to arrive and help him into the place. In the end, it didn't, but Murchison did. Having watched Thomas stand for 10 minutes like a sort of human redundancy on the pavement, he'd excused himself from Jameson in order to fetch his client.
What are you waiting for?
Murchison asked, stepping onto the pavement with a click of very expensive shoes. Thomas remained as he had been, facing the restaurant, arms listless, waiting. He shrugged, but even this took more effort than he'd expected. "I'm here, as you requested," he said, "but I'm not emotionally capable of doing much more than sign a form." Murchison frowned.
"How are your bollocks?"
"Bloody sore and larger than I remember. I think I may have cleaved one in two."
"Right, well, although I'm a barrister and not a doctor, I do know a very good cure for cleaved bollocks. And it's about £50 a glass."
"I'm not drinking again, Murchison."
"Spoken like a true denier. Come on, the food here is excellent."
"I don't have any money."
"I know. You've systematically transferred it all to me. Come on."
He held open the door. With reluctant steps, Thomas entered the restaurant. It smelt wonderful, and because of the stale stink of baked beans his flat was perused with, he felt encouragement tug from the depth of despair. Murchison ushered him to a table already occupied.
"This is Smitherington Blustonbury Jameson," he said, indicating its occupier. "An old acquaintance of mine, a very talented man, and someone who is likely to be an asset to us."
The man smiled. "You may call me Jameson." He held out a hand. Thomas raised his in an attempt to shake it, but didn't manage. Jameson,
Yes, I think that's still going to be too many syllables. Are you called anything shorter? Well, it has been said that even God calls me God, as do women who have had the pleasure of my pleasure. Murchison laughed and sat at the table. Ha! This is the man I wanted you to meet this morning. Are you talking to me or him? Thomas asked. Because I'm warning you, Murchison, I haven't felt this dreadful since flailing through my afterbirth. You, actually? Yes, well, I'm sorry I'm late, said Thomas, sitting in surrender, but I'm having a shit life. That's quite all right, said Jameson. As it happens, I specialise in them.